Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 2BSilent podcast. So in today's episode, we talked a lot about the idea of scarcity versus abundance, both in our spirituality, our spiritual practice, and our physical life, and where those two things come together and how they meet. And we invited my best friend, who I've known for many, many years, Niels, on to talk to us. He's a member of our program, and I think it was a really interesting conversation. I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope you do as well. All right. I'm just going to record this whole thing from the beginning so that we can start it whenever it's actually appropriate to start.
Hold on. I'm experimenting a little bit here.
Yeah.
No, this is better. I'm on a temporary rig in the basement here. So in the bunker, in the Boston Real
looks
bunker.
Good. We've done plenty of temporary rigs, so it's like that's good.
If it falls down, I'm just gonna sign off because it's kind of jury rigged together a little bit. So
perfect. We like that.
So I'm sorry, Dustin, did you say you had to do like an intro or?
No, I already did the intro for we recorded a podcast and then I just recorded the intro to it, put a little bow on it. And then
I didn't get to tell you like my bio that I wanted you to say for the intro.
Do you want to share it with me?
Gotta do it. Gotta do it now.
King amongst wizards would be how I start.
I love it.
We'll go with that.
That's right.
So what's on the agenda?
So there is no agenda. Basically, I mean, I guess I'll give you the same backstory that I gave Brian before we started the last conversation, which was basically like the other day I was kind of contemplating everything with 2BSilent and thinking about how we're promoting it and this whole process of like having the membership open and then having a deadline where it closes and how to automate that process because like from a marketing perspective, like scarcity increases conversion. So everyone says you should do that. And to be honest, I mean, we have found that like people tend to sign up more consistently when there's a deadline and almost always right before that deadline. But I don't really like the way that process feels to me. And I don't really like kind of utilizing scarcity, not even utilizing it. It's not even real. I mean, it is utilizing it in that instance, but like, I just don't, the way it feels like we're promoting the energy of scarcity because we're producing that experience qualitatively for people. And so it's like, that sucks. So, okay, I don't like that. I don't like that way that feels in myself. So why would I produce it in somebody else as a means of benefiting myself? Even if I think, yeah. So like, even if I think that like that's good for them or it's good for me or both, it doesn't really matter. I don't like the quality of that experience. So, and I was also thinking about just like everything that's going on in the world, like right now, it's like there's kind of like an endless source of bad news where it's like, and there's so many reasons to like be afraid right now, be scared, right? And to be like concerned about the future and to feel uncomfortable and what's going to happen and to be worried. And so like, I felt like the alternative, a better way to promote what we're doing and to offer it to people is just to really produce more conversations like this with our podcast that are centered around like the core idea of like, I mean, what I wanted to start with and what we did in the last episode was like, just one example of like why everything is going to be okay and how we use the things that we do to make it that way. And, why we have reasons not to be afraid. So, so that was kind of the essence of the last one. But, while we were having the conversation, Brian was like, we should get Niels on here because, we kind of had it in our heads that, we would collaborate with you on a podcast from the beginning. So like, what would that be like? And, and when I was imagining before we started the last podcast and when I was contemplating that as as a thing to do, just to make more of them. I was thinking like, just not necessarily like having a plan isn't a bad thing, like just going in and just having the plan be like a conversation where we produce like the resonance of what we believe, what we think about, what we value, like just, it's like, cause the podcast is a physical condensation of our energetic vibration. It's just like we're just vocalizing ourselves, and so like in our what we think and using it as a means to contemplate that and share that. And so I think that there's value there.
Well, I think it's like, the Joe Rogan experience too. I mean, one of the things he says all the time is, I don't know. I just like having these conversations, and it brings me, through the conversation and exchange of ideas and sort of burrowing down, much like Peterson does, right? It's like when he does his lectures, it's like he has an outline, but it's basically like he's thinking not just to himself, he's thinking out loud and including the audience in his thought process, right? So it's sort of like he's trying to figure things out on a deeper level by, actually using that mercurial part, right? The vocalization, the words, and having other people involved. Because, one of the things why I thought it would be good to have you, Niels, is not just because you have a good grasp of the language, and you have, you have that humor aspect too, which I think is really important, but you think about things and you've done things, and, you have information about this, but at the same time, it's like the last thing we want to do is, sort of be in the echo chamber, between, Dustin working with me for so many years, and he'll start mimicking back the things that, he thinks, or the things that I've taught him. And so sometimes we don't even know what questions to ask each other, because that's too tight, and so a lot of times, I'm always impressed when, during our conversations, he'll ask a question that's like, whoa, okay, hadn't thought about that, and so, and I don't feel like, there's some aspect of me that, like, when we do these things sort of impromptu, it's sort of like walking a tightrope a bit, but it's I don't mind that challenge. I think it makes us strive to articulate what we're trying to do in a better way, so that I haven't known you that long, but I feel confident that you can speak from the person's perspective that has done some of this, so you have some idea of how to do it, but that you may have small nuances that you're not familiar with, and you're going to ask questions about it. So, and that you're comfortable enough to put me on the spot and do that, so I think
not only that, I want to put you on the spot. I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I relish it, Brian. I want to make you uncomfortable. You're so cool all the time. It's like, fuck that.
Yeah, right. Thanks, but I know that's not the case.
Break your washing machine secretly and observe you trying to get it going.
Lovely.
It's funny. Dustin mentioned something at the very beginning, and it's something I think about a lot, because we talk about it and how you guys are getting new people to sign up, and that idea of scarcity. And, Dustin and I had some conversations this morning about that with some, the other programs that exist out there and the various, topics that they can cover. But I understand Dustin's point about, not wanting to promote the energy of scarcity, but it's almost like scarcity already exists in the concept in economics of asymmetric information, which I might be applying a bit loosely here, but asymmetric information is like, I'm selling a car to you. I know it's a piece of shit, but you don't know it's a piece of shit. So there's asymmetric information in that deal, right?
Right.
In the case of 2BSilent, it's like, you guys know what you're offering. You're established enough, Brian, that you've been teaching for a long time and doing this stuff for a long time, that you know what it can do for people. And there's folks out there that don't know everything you know about it, right? But just by the fact that the offer of scarcity of getting this information resonates with them on a level where it provokes a scarcity that's already in them. They say, oh God, oh man, I really want this stuff. I want to learn this. What he's saying, strikes a chord inside of me. If it didn't strike a chord inside of them, then there wouldn't be any scarcity to it at all. If I have a big pile of shit in my backyard, unless you're a big gardener and I say, hey, you know, it's going to be gone by tonight, you're not going to drive down here and try to get in on the shit pile, right?
Right.
So, like, the scarcity is predicated on people wanting this stuff in the first place, you know,
right.
and having a deep need for it. And I don't think there's anything nefarious about you reaching out to them in that way. And, you know, I know, and certainly there's a level of trust on their behalf in signing up. But I mean, really, what's the buy-in? They pay a monthly fee, they check it out, and they can leave if they want to.
Sure.
So the upside is potentially infinite, if you will. And the downside is really very little. I mean, I know times are tough, and it's easy for me to say that, you know, whatever that monthly fee is. And I know some people will scoff at that, but if you look at what people waste their money on, I mean, it's nothing. You know, you get down to the old cup of coffee a day kind of thing, right? And you can certainly do that to death with everything. And you can buy 100 cups of coffee a day on various programs. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Okay. It's good to hear from a different perspective. And I get what you know, and it's like, I mean, as long as we're upfront with it that way, I'm okay with it as well. I mean, you know, I guess maybe it's just, you know, saying it in this way, in this format is a little bit easier than, you know, sort of that generic scarcity model that marketers use to promote whatever topic. It could be cat food, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, right? It's like this, like, if you don't get your 12 cans today, it's going to be gone and you're done, and you're not going to get it. And it's like, you know, I mean, since scarcity is one of those things that is something that, you know, people who are trying to do spiritual practices, it seems to be one of those things that they're constantly trying to evade, you know, and not be in that mindset. But at the same time, if it's the thing that, you know, is highlighted, you know, just to say like, oh, we have this here, we don't know how long we're going to do it, or, you know, I'll do it for as long as I can. But if it comes down to it, when it seems that it's not, you know, because we spend time and effort and finance and all of these things on it, you know, if it's not something that people want, then I'm going to stop doing that, because it's like, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Why, you know, it's sort of like, I don't know, selling kites or whatever, you know, or, you know, non-motorized push mowers, you know, how many of them are out there, right? It's like, I mean, if you're really promoting that, you know, unless you're,
I think you're way off base, Brian. You know, the Danish word for kite is the same as the word for dragon. So I know what.
Oh, well, there you go. Right. Who knew?
But yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, you know, you can kind of take a different tack, obviously, as you can with everything. But to even, you know, you think about it, okay, we're offering this in a scarce way and it makes people sign up. And it's like, you know, the hard line there is, you know, you're an indecisive mess. I'm going to make it scarce so that you sign up and get this done, because otherwise you're going to sit there, right? Like that's the audience of like Jordan Peterson's audience, right? Of these like clean your room, like you know. But then, you know, you've got different audiences as well. So it plays differently to different folks. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, and what I know and what you guys know and what this conversation kind of reveals and allows people a window into is that your motives are pure. You're not doing it as this get rich quick, you know, evergreen income.
Obviously.
You know? It's like, it's very obvious, right? And I think the fact that you guys spend so much time thinking about this is just a testament to the fact that it's not the negative side of it, right? I mean,
right.
You don't see a podcast from, you know, London Real about, you know, going into their motives like this, right? I mean, it's
right.
So
yeah, true. You know, so yeah, I mean, it's like, again, it's like, you know, when I started teaching independently, you know, other than, you know, with groups rather than with individual students, you know, in 2008, so 12 years ago, give or take, you know, I literally started doing it just to shut up, you know, in the nicest way possible, my assistant at the time, who was running my office, my practice office. And she had done a number of those things with me, and she was studying with me. And so she was like, you need to offer this to more people. You need to do groups, you know, you need to do this. And I was like, you know, by the end, I was just so tired of her telling me that I was like, okay, here you go, put this out there. And, I really thought that maybe 3 to 5 people would say, oh, I'd like to do that, and then I could say to her, no, I'm not doing all this work for 3 to 5 people. It's like 3 to 5 people could approach me individually and sign up with me just to, study with me individually. That's not a group as far as I'm concerned. But what we found was when we did it, she came back with this triumphant thing. And I really expected it to be like 3 to 5 people and tell her no. It's like, and she came back with this huge list of people. And I thought, oh my God, it's like, because I just, as much as I think even now that my message is a little bit harder than a lot of people who teach this stuff, it's like, in a way, it's not all lovey-dovey, everything is good and all of that stuff. I thought it was even more dramatic back then, not that my message has changed, but the general message out there was very much sort of puppy dogs and flowers, and so,
well, thank God for COVID, huh? No more.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought there's no way, that I'm a dinosaur compared to, these people. They don't want this hardcore message, So
Right.
but I was wrong. And so that's how it all started. And now, we feel like, or at least I feel like, okay, maybe there are other people out there that want that sort of no nonsense approach as well. And they're willing to, hear it, or maybe even, that they've been disappointed with, sort of their new agey, no structure kind of approach to these things, or sort of that puppy dogs and flowers approach, and, that everything is good, and, you should just be happy with whatever you have, and, all of
Right.
those things, and thinking, there may be other people that have had that and they're looking for an alternative to that because it's not working for them.
And I don't think that's changed, right? I mean, those people are still out there.
No, they're still out there for sure.
And what's interesting, I mean, when you first started, right, you had groups and you had discrete classes and sort of, year-to-year progress. And it's really no different with the online class. I mean, you can call it a scarcity window on the sign up, but really you can look at it as just discrete classes. I mean, a college, you sign up every year, every semester, and there's a window and you're done and you're in that class, you're in that group. And I think with the onboarding that you guys have to do with new folks, and, it's not easy to have people continually coming on, especially with the weekly calls, because then you're forced to kind of go back and cover the more elementary, rudimentary stuff, which, as we know, is the most important stuff anyway, right? The simple practice.
That's right.
Start with.
That's right.
But, I think it helps you guys deliver the product better when, you have that sort of discrete group that you can corral in and say, okay, you're the new admittance and now you're coming in and we're closing it off, because you don't want this onesie twosie coming on. That'll really kind of drag down the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we'll see, because I think we're going to try to put it out there as being open, open for a little while, and maybe run these podcasts and see how it goes. But if we find,
and especially if you're giving yourself a time parameter to do that, like let's say you're going to do that for 3 months or 90 days or whatever. If you're going to just leave it open for 90 days and see what that produces, if it produces the same as whatever we usually do, a week long, sort of
launch type thing.
Launch, and see, is it double that, or is it the same, or is it less? Well, then we'll know. We'll have our answer, right? And so we can just empirically look at it and say, okay, here's the data. This is, obviously,
Right. It's kind of like in our last conversation, we were talking about like congruency. And so it's kind of like, that's basically an example of like being congruent. It's like, I want it to be this way. I think it should be this way. It should be able to just be open, and we shouldn't have to, impose deadlines to inspire people to participate in something that we are producing that we feel is of high value, And so it's like, all right, well, then you run that test and you give it a certain period of time. Yep. And then you get to have that conversation with the world where you're like, I'm congruent in what I'm doing. Now the world can reflect back to me, like, does this produce the result that I think it should produce? And if it does or doesn't, that's information we can use to correct ourselves and figure out, like, okay, like either approaching the promotion of our program in this way that we feel like we want it to be is in alignment with reality and with human nature and with our own ideals of how we think how it should be, or on the alternative side, my personal feelings of ethics or morality or what I want to put out there or not put out there is I don't know, the ideal that I'm holding myself to is an ideal that is out of alignment with reality, basically, right? Which is, or
the general populace.
Yeah, or it's just like, okay, you can hold yourself to a certain standard, or you can imagine that things can be a certain way all you want them to be, but at the end of the day, they either are that way or they aren't. and that fitting yourself into that ideal model that you hold for yourself is either going to produce the results that you want, or it's going to produce no results, because it doesn't have anything to do with reality. You're kidding yourself. So, I don't know if that makes sense or where to go from there, but
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's a really perfect way of saying it, I think. I mean, that congruency, which is a part of the teaching, right? I mean, because when we're talking about all this, it's like, oh, is this too much? Is this too little? The subjectivity of it sort of becomes more objective when the objectivity is what you're congruent with, right? That adds sort of a bedrock to act on, right? I mean, an Amish guy teaching a farming class is going to be like, we're not sending emails. What are you, crazy? You know what I mean? So it's like, there's kind of like these different technologies and techniques and things that you can use to get you have something you're trying to get people to do. What are you willing to do to get them to do it? There's this whole gradient to that, and falling back on what you're congruent with is, yeah, I mean, that's a really great point, Dustin.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm glad we got that out of the way. And so like, where do we go from here? I mean, in our conversation with you, Niels, is like, well, I feel like we could take this in two directions. One would be like kind of discussing with Brian, like the natural way that I would take the direction would be to talk about the ideas of scarcity and abundance, and like Brian's like philosophy around those things from his experience. And because I think a lot of those ideas come up for people when they're talking about their spirituality, their spiritual practice, whether it's like how they relate themselves to concepts of abundance. I mean, one of the things that Brian always says to me, and says on a semi-regular basis, is like, there's no difference between a dime and $1 million to the universe. And so I feel like that's a principle, but it's also an ideal, and it also like has there's a lot there when we contemplate, like, not just what that means as a philosophical concept, but like, what does that actually mean for me in my life, and how do I actually like apply that and experience it within myself, But sure. I was going to say, so that would be one direction. The other direction would be like one direction. The other direction would be like, like, since this is our first podcast with you, like, do you have anything that's like top of mind for you right now that you would want to like challenge Brian on or talk to him about? Because like there's always time to talk about the idea of scarcity or abundance or whatever.
Yeah. Well, how about this? How about both of those at the same time? How about what's on the top of my head is scarcity and abundance?
And how do we engage those?
Well, there's this. So I had this sort of epiphany the other day. I'm very fond of epiphanies. I have so many that I think maybe I'm watering them down too much. But I'm an epiphany factory over here. So I had this thought, and hopefully I can articulate this well, about it had to do with clinging to certain facets of my experience that represent abundance, right? So, to be specific, say I'm in my life, I have certain people that are very generous with me and are capable of being very generous with me, right? And so they offer me, say, a stock in a company, right? Literal example, like stock in a company, and say, oh, that's great, I have that stock now. So I have the ability to take the dividends from that, which are significant enough, and I can spend it and I can get what I want. And it sort of brings up a lot of things for me. And one of them is sort of say, okay, I've got that now. I've got this sense of relief with that. Like, okay, I got it. I achieved that. I attained that thing, and I can fall back on that, right? But in doing that and in looking at that specific thing in that way and sort of identifying with that thing, I find what happens is if it gets called into question, right, because everything in this world is impermanent and nothing is going to be there forever. If I focus on that specific thing, I can have a lot of anxiety around it and be like, oh, I might lose that, or maybe it's not going to pay dividends this year ever, and the market's changing and COVID's going to, and it becomes sort of a focal point for all the anxieties and all of those things, right? And I sort of had this realization that's, I have at all times abundance in myriad of different forms, and that abundance never goes away. I'm never in a place in the universe where I don't have access to abundance. It's just that if I cling to that one aspect that was given to me and say, that's it, that's the spigot of abundance from the universe, and it's drying up before my eyes and I'm weeping at the feet of this spigot of abundance that's being closed off, I'm not paying attention to the one that's now opening up, because it never stops. It can just change form. Right. And because it's always there. And our limitations and our beliefs are what makes us think that, oh, it's going away and now all is lost. And I'm crying in my field of dying grapes and I'm a French vintner. I don't know what the hell just made me think of that, but
yeah. No, it's true, right? I mean, that's the idea that it never stops, right? And so, I think the other thing is to, for me, it's always I think one thing that makes the impact less on me, and maybe on you as well, and Dustin, I'm not sure, is that I expect it to change. I never expect anything to stay exactly the same. My expectation when I do anything is that will change. There's nothing that's permanent, right? Change is the only thing that's permanent. And so knowing that I'm going to do that, I'll ride that horse as long as it's good. And then when it stops performing or I need something else, then I change it up, right? And I have the ability to do that. And if I don't, I sacrifice something else in order to, achieve that new horse or whatever it was, that I need in order to keep moving in the direction that I want to move in. And that even the rate of change is going to be different, right? So, these dividends may hold out for years, maybe for your whole life, but maybe not too, maybe 5 years max, maybe 6 months, who knows, right? And if I, it's one of the reasons that I never put all my eggs in one basket, right? It's because that when one thing dries up, another thing rises. And, and that I just expect everything to change, that even my practices are going to change. There are certain things that, I can remember over the years that they were like the highlight of my practice. And now I do them once in a while, because they dried up a little bit and something else took precedence, of whatever it was that I was trying to achieve at the time. My understanding became, through those practices, my understanding in general, it got more expanded. So I was able to transition into some other aspect that was producing more of what I wanted at that time. And the other one sort of, it doesn't go away, it just gets pared back a bit, right? And there's a natural ebb and flow to those things. But to think it's one of those, I think right from the beginning, it's one of those things that we need, trying to understand these things we need to eradicate right from the beginning, is that things are going to be, either a constant up, a constant down, or a constant neutral. That's like, they're never like that. Even up is going to be, a wavering line. Down is going to be a wavering line, and this is definitely a wavering line in between, right? So it's like, to think that any of these things are going to be consistently, forever on an increase or a decrease or flat is already, there's nothing in this world that's like that. So why would you think that anything that we do is going to be, is going to take that form?
There's another aspect too that it brings up for me about like the dragon hoarding the pile of gold, right? Like in that it's, if, what do you want and why do you want it, right? First principles.
Right.
If you've got this source of abundance, which is basically resources in a way, right? But you don't know really what you want to do with it, it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because then it's just sort of stock. I'm just going to pile it up, and I'm doing it in the name of security, right? So I'm going to be secure in this big pile of things that I'm piling up, right? But it's like, no, not even really that, right? I mean, you put it, I'm going to put it all and invest it in the stock market. And then COVID hits and it's cut in half, or, there's no avenue for security 100% in the face of that constant change. And that's why it's like, it's better to be the skilled sailor in the winds, right? Than it is to just sit.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like your true investment is in yourself. That's the only thing that's consistent, right? Is like your understanding and your ability. Look, it's like,
Lay up
I use
treasures
this analogy.
Where moth and rust do not consume,
Yeah. This idea, right? It's like, people can, there are two, it's almost like, if you're traversing from one place to another and you get to a point, there's a certain point where it's like you hit a river that you need to cross, or a brook or whatever, but it's deep enough where you have to actually think about it, right? If you're contemplating it for a certain amount of time. Now, if you're sitting there and spending days worrying about it, by the time you do try to traverse it, you're so exhausted that you can't make it. Right? Instead of saying, and I'm not saying you don't want to be foolhardy and just jump in and go and whatever, right? It's like you need to assess your ability to be able to do something and then spend the right amount of time so that you have enough knowledge to make a good effort at it. And then finally, either A, you turn around and go back, or B, you go forward and go across in the best way possible. And it's like, those, and I think a lot of people get stuck on the bank, just thinking about it, lamenting about it, thinking of all the bad possibilities, all the good possibilities, but just like ruminating about it and wearing their energy down just thinking about it. And then by the time they go to act, they don't have enough energy to really ford that river or brook or whatever it is, the challenge that comes up against them, right? It's like, it's
and
like
all the other challenges that they're avoiding because they're not acting on that one, right? All of the other opportunities that you're missing.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And your sinew and your joints are literally freezing metaphorically. And like, you're losing the ability to act in general by not acting on that one thing.
And the momentum of that perpetuates the same thing of just every time you come to something, it's like every time you come to some challenge, it's basically like that rumination kicks in. That's procrastination, right? Where it's just like you're wearing your energy down until the point where even if you have the right idea, even if you have the right, let's say ability to know where to put your next step and go across that, you don't have the energy to do it anymore, because you've worn yourself down just worrying about all the infinite possibilities of what could happen. And it's like, instead of, spend your energy on training yourself to maneuver well within that scenario, whatever it is. And in this case, we're talking about life, right? And it's like, there's certain, if we want, depending on the level of what you want to achieve, right? There are certain general parameters that you should be skilled at, right? So it's sort of like we're coming back again to things that other people have said, right? So it's like you need, to be engaged and be good with your relationships. We all learn about that our whole lives, right? It's like enhancing some, getting rid of others, having good experiences, bad experiences, but it's all about learning how to do this, in a way that's good for us, right? And it's like the same thing with our health, the same thing with our level of success, whatever that is for us, right? And security. So, within all of those things. So it's like, but that's the stuff that we should be doing when we're young, is like learning all the parameters of these things and learning how to, maneuver through this. Look, if you can't, the person that can swim 1,000 laps in an Olympic-sized pool has zero experience about, learning to swim in the ocean, and so it's a different environment completely, right? But, for life, we're sort of thrust into the life and wherever we started. And then, if we want to stay in that place, well, we learn to maneuver within that sphere. But if we want to move into another sphere, it's like, there are avenues for us to do that. And we need to learn, to maneuver within those and use our energy to learning how to maneuver skillfully through that. It's sort of like a teacher of mine said, it's like the good, of course, coming from a different culture, right? The good riverman, meaning somebody who maneuvers a barge or a boat down a river, a raft, more like that, is like, somebody who looks farther down, right? And says, okay, I know my boat and my ability to get through these things is good enough where I don't care about these little bumps that we're going to get on this rock here or that, but it's going to put me in position so I don't hit the big rocks farther down. And so it's having that foresight and knowing how to do that, right? And looking ahead and saying, like, I really want to get to this place. Well, here are all the things that I'm probably going to need to learn how to do well in order to achieve that goal, or be, more, the ability to hit that goal is going to be, manifest in a greater capacity for that than if I just sort of wander into it and maybe even get the goal ahead of time, but now I can't keep the goal because I don't have the skill set to sort of maneuver there well, right?
And it's about building that momentum and respecting the momentum that can work in either direction, right? I mean,
absolutely.
When you start floundering, it's, you look at someone, they become a hoarder, they gain 100 pounds, it starts layering on these things environmentally. I mean, that's even just physically, I mean, they put themselves in positions. You're in a relationship that's very limiting, in a physical environment that's very limiting. You're physically very limited, it just starts to layer on, and then crawling out of that and getting momentum the other way. I mean, it can be a long journey out, but the momentum starts working the other way immediately,
Right, exactly.
Dustin, I don't know if we want to just take a quick little cut out here if we have to, but if my audio's okay, is it better? I kind of had an idea to maybe shift my setup here if I can do that right now, if that's okay, to
sure.
Make it better.
Yeah.
All right. Got an idea.
I texted Niels that to increase his audio level slightly if he could, because you were noticeably louder than him, and so when guys were like going back and forth, I didn't want it to,
just so you didn't have to adjust it that much.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really because it's all part of one audio track, but I can. Right. I can at least if we can tweak it, it'll be better in the long run. But, yeah. We should do a mic check next time.
Yeah.
A levels check or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where are you, man?
I'm in my basement. Short notice. I couldn't request quiet zones.
Yeah. You did pretty good on a short notice.
Yeah, I mean, I got the this is a blanket that I
nice. I like it.
So I do have a green screen. We could go I could put the pyramids behind me with people shooting
there you
the
go.
top of them.
Well, it's just like those Zoom backgrounds, It's like, there you go. We did that the other day with a family call, and it was pretty funny actually, because if people moved out of the frame, it was like they were sinking into the background, and then they disappeared, and then they'd come back again. It was like, and it would be like.
That's funny.
It's pretty funny, actually.
How's my audio now, Dustin? I might have just been the way I was talking. I don't know.
I think it's a little better. Might just be the fact that we're using different devices. So
let me see about this. Mm-hmm. All right, how's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
I turned off automatically adjust volume.
Oh yeah.
On the mic. I don't know.
Oh yeah. That'll do it.
All right, cool.
That's what I like to hear. Literally.
Back in business. I put the I put the video like behind my camera now so I can look straight forward.
Nice.
I have it on top of hold on, my Now and Zen timer. Can you hear it?
Oh yeah. I've got one of those.
Let us begin.
We're in it now.
Show off our gongs.
The tingsha, the Now and Zen timers. We're in the mode.
I use the Now and Zen in my sauna, which is right here. So
yeah, nice.
Cool.
All right. So
Dusty, what you got, huh? Lay something out. What's on your mind grapes, buddy?
Well, I guess just continuing with that concept of like scarcity and abundance, like, I don't know, I guess one of the things that like I see out there a lot that, I don't know. I don't really know quite what I think about this, and maybe that's why it's a good thing to bring up. But like when I see a lot of the programs that promote like manifestation and things like that, like there's always, it very often goes hand in hand with the idea of like abundance. Like people talk about like having an abundance mindset, and they talk about like the manifestation or the magic that occurs like when you step into an abundance mindset, and like they'll portray like living in their dream life on a beach somewhere, throwing cash around, or like whatever, or like, or guys that teach like how to Nevelize, like
a Ferrari,
or Nevelize like, money by like imagining yourself like counting cash, and
which I did, and I wound up in a shitty job counting money counters. I'm kidding. Careful what you wish for.
You are good.
I'm good. I'm around millions of dollars on a weekly basis.
It's just not mine.
Yeah, so
sorry, go ahead.
No. So yeah, it's perfect. I mean, I don't really know like where to go from there, but it's more like I know that like that's what I sense, like that's what I feel when I look at those ads when they come on my screen. It's like that's my response is not that like necessarily that you're full of shit, but it's like there's something that's not quite right about it. It's like, and I don't necessarily know. And it's like, so, and I think what I sense in that is like, there is, it's almost like there's some way in which that's true, but there's also a way in which it's not true. And so because of that,
they're assuming what people want, that it's like all about the money, the cars, the beach, like stylized version of it, or
more like the charlatanism of selling people the idea that that's easily achieved, and that like the universe can be so easily manipulated to give you what you want by a process that you can achieve internally that is also just as easy if you have the right key to unlock that door, which is the key that I have, which is the key I'm selling you.
The Inner Circle Platinum program as well.
Right. So all of that stacks up to like, I feel discord when I see that. And because like it's part of it too, is like the disparateness of like, okay, the audience that sees that, the reality of their life situation, ranging from anything from, average American income or middle class, American consumer, to somebody who like barely has enough money to just have a phone that they can see that ad on, that's like scraping by, that's like living in like real scarcity, to the person who is portraying themselves in that situation of living a dream life or whatever. There's just this like whole stack of just incongruent situations messaging realities. And I think that that's like what we're seeing now. Like one of the channels that I keep sending you clips of is like these guys, Rebel Wisdom, which we really like. Right. And I think that like, that's one of the things that they're really trying to get at in their conversations is like, one layer of it is like, I don't know, like, how do you communicate clearly and truthfully and like perceive truth and like wisdom, truthful wisdom that you can apply in your life that will help you wherever you are right here, right now, no matter what your situation is, when there's so much ultimate subjectivity happening all the time in the world right now. Like the ultimate subjectivity, and by ultimate subjectivity, I mean like the person who's in a relative situation of poverty looking at that ad and feeling like an abundance mindset isn't going to do it for me, or I've tried that, it didn't work, that's horseshit, and I have the real life experience to prove that. And then there's the person who's portraying themselves in their dream life, selling their product or program to help other people get there, and they're actually like congruent with their messaging and what they're doing and what they're selling, and they're living in this like super financially abundant state. And those two things are both true for each person, but like, what's the actual truth in the middle somewhere? It's like, how are we supposed to like figure that out? And then also like, I don't know, I don't know if I can articulate my conundrum better than that.
I think I know what you're saying is that, the idea that if it makes, here's the thing, if you can't articulate it, I don't think you need to more than that, because I think the core of that is like, how do you take these two seemingly diametrically opposed truths and where's the commonality between them? Where's the commonality between the person that has done that literally? Like, I mean, the first person that comes to mind like that is like, let's say Joe Vitale, who's a, law of attraction guru, and like living on the streets of Houston, for homeless for a long time. And then finally, through tapes and messaging and going to the library to get, like stuff that today, it would be a momentous, back then was a momentous thing to do, right? Compared to like today, where if you have a phone, you can dial up almost anything and get it, just in your head all the time. You don't have to go to a library, get a library card, go and, I'm just thinking of all the things that I remember, and thinking about him listening to some of his lectures and saying like, Jesus, and even going into the library as a homeless person, right? And saying that you have a library card, which didn't cost you anything, but having to deal with the opinions of people in there that are like, I don't want this guy in here, or I don't, what's this guy doing here? Or he smells bad or whatever. But just being so focused on that was your light at the end of the tunnel to try to get you out of that place, not knowing any other way to do it, right? You get to that desperate place, right? Where it's like, I don't know anything else to do. So it's a real surrender of your, just your worth and your ability to what you think about yourself, and putting all that aside and just saying, I don't give a shit what other people think. This is the only light, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to closer to the end of that tunnel, so that I can maybe, if everything is true about this and I really put myself out there and I really do that. Now, how many people really do that? I think that that's part of the, the conundrum here, right? It's like, and we have the data on that. This is not something that we have to actually, it's not a matter of like, oh, this is just my opinion or that's like, we have the data on that. 2% of the people that do any of these programs, whether they're business programs, financial programs, 2% of them actually hit that highest level of achievement. So 98%, it doesn't mean that they haven't gotten something out of it. Sure, it may be just to the point where it made a more clear idea for them of what it would take to do that, and maybe just a certain aspect of their life got better. It could be the financial aspect, but it could be some other aspect, right? Relationship, health, whatever. They've gotten to a certain point of that, but what they were going after didn't come to fruition, at least not in the way that they expected it to in that territory. So 2% make it to that, super duper level. Just like we can take anything in nature, anything in our society, we can look at those percentages all we want. And that is, that comes through, right? The 2%, of the wealthy in this country. But then there's the 2% of them that are the super wealthy, right? That they're untouchable financially. They would literally, you'd have to sell the earth to get them out of that place, right? So,
well, not only that, but the goalposts, I mean, you look at, I think it's if you make over $30,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of income earners in the world.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean, it's, and when you talk about, the ads using all these things, like you're at the beach and, the cars and all this stuff. I mean, what the West has gotten used to is a normal lifestyle, like where you're taking these vacations and just the level of prosperity. I mean, we live better than Louis XIV, right?
Right.
I mean, people in the ghetto live better than Louis XIV did in the Palace of Versailles, right? They have more access to resources. And so it's interesting to think about, like, what do it really comes down to? What do you want and why do you want it, right? And I mean, to say you've got this, how much does it take to make a person successful and happy? I mean, you can look at a homeless person and say, oh, look how far you've got to go before you can own the New England Patriots. Or you can say, look how far you've got to go to have a nice little home and a nice family and grow some vegetables in your backyard and have a decent job. And, it's where are the goalposts, right? And everyone's entitled to do whatever, obviously, go for whatever they want. But
pick the goal that you want, and I think the same thing with any of these programs. I mean, like, okay, the program has to be something that works. Obviously, it can't just be, I mean, it shouldn't be a get rich quick sort of scam, but I mean, if it's something that actually is viable, like a lot of the business programs and the people that we've listened to over time, right? I mean, they're successful people. They're not people that are, you look at their bank account and you go, I mean, they're transparent in that way, right? They actually they have done the things that they are teaching, right? And so that's a good thing. But, again, I often think about it, and I can't remember who said this, but I love it. And I'm sure I'm going to paraphrase it a bit. It's like most people miss their opportunities because, it carries a shovel and it looks like work. Right. And
yeah,
so,
I mean, as soon as you said shovel, I was like, I'm out.
Well, that's it, but that's the idea, right? It's like, if you really want any of these things, you have as much chance of just miraculously manifesting it as you do winning the lottery, which we know is a bazillion to one chance, right? It doesn't mean that people don't do it. Obviously, people win the lottery, or there wouldn't be a lottery out there to win, right? So it would just go by the wayside. So, but the idea is that, where are you going to hang your hat, so to speak? Are you going to, for me, I've always sort of doubled down on myself rather than, a thing or because, you could buy into, spend money, do whatever on the best program in the world, right? But if you're not going to do anything about it, if it's just more, it's like the people that buy, learn at home programs, right? And then they sit on the shelf and there's like a percentage, it's like 80% of those people, like, they never take the wrapper off. Right? It's like, I'm way better. That's blown.
I take the wrapper
blows
off
me away,
time.
right?
So I'm feeling pretty good.
There you go. So it's like, you're in the zone,
man. Get rid of those wrappers right away. Before it goes into the dust collection phase.
But that's an amazing percentage when you think about it. People actually spend their money, hard-earned money, which is basically just a representation of your time, your effort, right? It's like people give you money for your effort and your time. Time you'll never get back. That's the thing, right? We make jokes about it now, like, oh, you listen to some conversation or some program, or you watch some shit on YouTube, and it's like, oh, I'm never going to get that time back again. It's like it was a waste, right? Or a bad movie or whatever it is. We all have these little things, but it's like, to actually spend your hard-earned time on something and then never take the wrapper off it to even engage the practice to see if it will produce something for you. You know, so
now you can just tuck it in a folder on your computer and just forget about it too, which is nice.
Right.
You know? Just really move on.
Sure. You know,
I mean, this for me, brings up again the whole concept of what do you want and why do you want it, right? Because if all of these tools don't even address that, then it's like they're one step too far, and people are getting it and they're buying a tool for a purpose. You know, I bought a chainsaw. It's like, why? I don't know. Just look really cool. I don't have any trees, but God damn it, I wanted this chainsaw.
I love the sound of it.
But, you know, that's interesting. I mean, and especially too, not to intellectualize this too much, but it's like, I think a lot about this and doing the exercises, you know, what do you want and why do you want? It's sort of a lot of what we could want can be socially inherited. You know, it's based on the context that we've sort of, you know, here we are. I mean, you can look at it like my soul chose to be born in this American society, you know, that kind of thing. But what we want comes from, you know, a lot of that's learned. And that's where there's kind of this fine balance between doing that exercise and writing it out so deep and going, why do I want? Why do I want that? Why do I want that? Because you're almost peeling off the layers that were culturally added to get to that deeper, more archetypical sort of incarnated need within you, right?
Right.
And I mean, I had sent Dustin a link earlier in the week, which was, it was like a cocoa bean farmer in Africa. And he like $7 a day. He has like 19 people in his family. They implied that he has like 7 workers. He has 19 people in his family, and he has $7 to like deal with all of those people, like pay the workers, feed his family. And the guy had never eaten chocolate in his life. So he was like a cocoa farmer for like 20 years, making these beans that get exported so we can go to CVS, eat half a chocolate bar and throw it in the trash. And this guy had never eaten chocolate in his life. And, you know, when I watch something like that, I'm like, you know, the gratitude, right? Cultivating the gratitude in my life for what I have. And it's like, okay, what do I want? And here's this big list of stuff. Meanwhile, that guy's like, I want what that guy has, right? He's looking at my life like, what? Are you serious? You work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? What the hell are you talking about right now?
Well,
he doesn't even know what not working is, right? I mean, they've got the clothes on their back, right? So, you know, and again, with that dichotomy Dustin's talking about, that distance, right? There is a relativity to it as well. I mean, for that guy to get to where we are is a big leap, but, you know, I mean, you
Huge.
can. It's interesting. I don't know. I don't have an answer for what, you know, it's individual, right? I can't put myself in that guy's shoes. I can't be him, but I can use my awareness of him as cultivating, you know, some gratitude within myself for what I do have, and not losing sight and overrunning what I have and saying, okay, I need more, which is kind of the Western
chasing your
way,
shadow.
Right? Yeah.
Chasing your shadow.
What's the next thing? Yeah.
Right. And there are some people that live for that. Right? It's like, it's not even about the amount that they have now. It's how much can they acquire. And that's the thing that they love. Like I had a friend, you know, a number of years ago, who, you know, his business ran so well that he was on top of it and had produced this business that ran so well that at a certain point, he got so bored, he used to break things within the business so that he could fix it. Like he would set up situations that he knew were going to go south and let it do that so that he could fix it, because he was so bored with just the, you know, the capacity for the business to self-correct.
That's interesting in the context of our conversation earlier about change, right? About that,
right.
You know, nothing lasts forever. Everything's changing. Well, he's in this situation. It's almost like, okay, you want this? Let's see what it's like when you're in your little prison cell of an office when everything's just running great and there's no
right. I mean, that's sort of like that hypothetical situation of people saying like, oh, I would love to see, you know, like if I just, you know, why do you keep doing this if you can just produce whatever you think about? You know, it's like, well, right. You know, then why wouldn't you just keep doing that? Well, you know, because you get, you know, if you had that ability, which, you know, we could speculate all day about that. You know, if you had the ability to do that, you know, wouldn't you get bored after a while? You know, because being a human, you know, unless your whole,
like Alan Watts,
you wouldn't be human anymore if you were out of that zone, right? You wouldn't be a human,
right?
Yeah.
That's what Alan Watts would always say. Like, if you're God, eventually you're like, okay, you know, the monad says, I'd like to be two for a while. I'd like to forget about myself for a little while and try something else, right?
Which is kind of that hermetic idea, you know, the only thing that, you know, the only thing that God doesn't that he doesn't have is limitation, right? So when you don't have that, how do you experience yourself? How do you experience the world? Well, if you have all these other abilities of being, omnipotent and omniscient and, all of these everythings, right? It's like you create
keep going, keep listing them. I like it.
Yeah, you keep, you create, these little avatars basically, which you can experience the whole thing over again from their perspective, each one individually, all at the same time. Wouldn't that be a novel idea, right? So it's like I can experience myself through them trying to achieve union with me and through all of their life experiences. So, we all become just, my idea is that, I'm just a POV, for God, and so it's like my good experiences, my bad experiences, my neutral experiences, all of these things, I'm trying to do, my goal is to try to give, like if you, this is one of these things that happened to me a long time ago, it's like I had this idea, like, look, if God or some aspect of God came to you and said, all right, tomorrow or a week from now, I'm going to live observing and experiencing everything you experience, and your only goal is to experience it to the fullest, whatever that is. And whatever you think, there's no right or wrong. You can't do it incorrectly. The only thing that you could fall short on is not really experiencing anything, like being afraid to go out and do things, because you're afraid that I'm going to be upset with you if it's bad. And and I thought about that, and I thought, wouldn't that be, kind of a cool way to live your life? It's like, okay, if, he is sort of, or whatever, this thing that we call God is, within each of us and is experiencing everything we do. Wouldn't you want to make that as interesting for him as possible, right? It's like, you'd want to set it up. So you'd like, you'd probably wake up early, you'd be engaged in all the things that you think, it's like you eat the very best stuff that you could and really enjoy it. You'd want him to experience it, not just like shoving everything, and like going on, you'd
been watching
run through your day. What's that?
Have you been secretly watching me eat? I'm a bit of a shoveler. I've been accused of shoveling.
We've all done that, but I'm just saying, it's like if we knew that was the case, if you really knew in your heart, that you had that experience, and that, at the end of the day, he was going to go like, dude, that was wild, thank you for that. That was so awesome, or like, okay, yeah, there was some good stuff. There was about, or like, just like, I gave you the keys to the kingdom and you sat on the couch. I'm pretty disappointed with that. Why should I let you continue? It's like, it comes, we have so many stories from so many traditions about that, right? It's like, it's like, I always think of that biblical one that everybody sort of misinterprets all the time, or at least, from a standpoint of like, to those that much has been given, more will be given, if you do something with it. And from those who's taken it away, gets taken away, right? So it's like the guy that gets the, 10 silver pieces when the master goes away, and one guy invests it and makes more and comes back and says it. The other guy buries it because he doesn't want to lose it because he's too afraid, and the guy takes it all away from him and throws him out, right? Because it's like he didn't do anything.
He's like, what the hell? I put it in the ground. I kept it safe.
Right, but
not good enough.
Not good enough. Even what would be better is if they would have had a third person that invested it and lost it all, and he learned that experience, that would have even been okay, you tried, good. What'd you learn? Anything? Okay, fine, do it again, and try to make it better this time.
I feel like that's the same guy that's like the brother of the prodigal son too. The prodigal son comes back. He's like, can I catch a break? I'm doing everything right over here.
Right. It's like, nah, it's like, but that's too, it's almost like it's too boring, it's like, you're in the safe zone all the time. And some people, that's their mode, right? They need the idea that, again, part of that scarcity idea, bringing it back, right, is that, people feel like, they don't want to sort of invest what they have now from experience and put themselves out there anymore to glean more experience, right? Of whatever nature, you're going for the good experience, but you might fall short. Okay, well, then you don't do that. You adjust, and you if that experience is something you really want to have, you have to invest something of yourself. You have to have some skin in the game in order to produce an effect that's different, that's more novel, right? And so, but some people aren't willing to do that. And I feel it's the same thing with this. It's almost like there's a whole class of people that think that, spirituality is just, should be given for nothing and should be, it's just sort of your birthright and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, the potential is there for everyone, but who's going to, manifest to what degree is who puts the most skin in the game, when it comes to that.
That's such an interesting concept, though, and I'm always have the fortunate and unfortunate ability to see both sides of everything as if I believe it, which leaves me sort of ambivalent. But, no. The whole money spirituality thing, I mean, that's something you guys have run into immediately. I mean, you see it every time anyone's trying to do anything spiritual and there's money involved. They're like, oh, you can't, it's profane to have money involved in this at all. Like, how dare you ask for money, and they, they're running into the temple and flipping over the tables, the money changers tables. Right. And it's like, I think you're missing the point here, and I think it says more about the way they view money itself. Right. I mean, money is nothing. It's a medium of exchange of resources. Right. And so if it's interesting because if they really do look at it like that, then they're saying the teachings aren't worth anything, basically, because it is worth something, and then there's a valid exchange of value, or there isn't. I mean, we have a saying around our office: if you give something away, it has no value. Right. In ours, it's a tangible thing. I mean, we have certain products that come with like accessories and stuff. And if you just give them to the people and they go, hey, we lost that brush that came with it. Can we get another one? And you go, well, next time, we sell that machine, that brush costs $5. And then they go, ooh, put that brush on the shelf. It costs $5, right?
Right.
I mean, so.
I mean, we see that with kids these days, for a long time. It's like, if my kids were, we tried to teach them, but, they'd go through these phases, right? If they were lackadaisical with things, then, and it broke or whatever, then they didn't get another one. It's like they'd have to go and do something to earn that back so that they had some value to it, right? It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, and I remember the things that were of really high value to them, they really took care of, because they knew from the experience of their siblings or whatever. It's like, look, if you broke that, if it was a real accident, that's one thing. But if it was negligence or something like that, then it was like, no. They didn't just immediately get a replacement, even if it made life harder for us, which usually it did.
So like if they rip their pants or something, you just send them to school with no pants. They're like,
yeah, basically, it's like, here's a tablecloth. You make do.
Get a stapler and some construction paper and figure it out.
Exactly.
When I was a kid, I had to walk 6 miles through the snow naked.
Right. You're on my team. Well, that's it. It's like we just didn't have the resources. If you grow up like that, I mean, it's like I grew up like that. It's like we didn't have the resources. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, I learned early, right? It's like, you needed to get back and forth to work. You couldn't always get a ride with somebody, you had to get a car. And so, you got the car that you could afford. And it was like, my parents didn't have the money to buy me a car. It's like, Jesus, it's like, I've been working since I was 13. So it's like, come on. So it's like, they were like, and don't forget, you're going to have to get insurance, and don't forget, you're going to have maintenance and you're going to have to buy gas. And so it was part of like understanding that, all of these things were inherent in, and taking care of that thing. It wasn't like I was racing around in this car that was going to fall apart. It's like I needed it to get back and forth to work. So it's like, you're looking at the goals that you want to achieve. And for me, it was working, getting enough money to go away to college. Right. So it wasn't like, that was the goal. It wasn't about like having a fancy car and racing it around town,
When you look back on it, Brian, you don't look at it, you don't feel like you didn't have enough, right? You don't look at it like that, right? It's just the way it was, right?
No, it's just the way it was. And somebody asked me this the other day, and I'm like, they're like, God, you work so much. And I'm like, that's one of the things this COVID thing has done for me, right? It's like, I said, honestly, I mean, and it's not to take away from anybody, but I'm just saying for myself, look, I haven't had this much time off in 30 years.
Yeah. No, I
could
agree.
add all the time off I've had in 30 years. It wouldn't equal the time off I've had in these last couple months. Not at all.
The silver lining on this thing for me has just, knock on wood. I mean, I haven't suffered anybody getting it,
Right.
I know there's a lot of suffering out there, but the upside to this has been enormous for me. I mean,
me too.
I got married last year. I weighed 207 pounds. I'm down to 177. I mean, I've been like, it's like I've just, I've taken full advantage of this, and it's
absolutely. But I think that's a mindset too, right? It's like, we see, there's an old saying, it's like, chaos, produces opportunity, right? So it's like, if you're looking at it that way, it's like, it makes a big difference, right? So it's like, and people would say, oh my God, but you work so hard all the time. And it's not like I'm a workaholic. Believe me, I can relax with the best of them when I have the time, but I do what I feel is necessary at the time. And I put things in order. But anytime somebody says, oh, you work so hard, I always tell them this story. It's like, anytime I think, and normally I don't usually even say that I'm working hard, right? I mean, it's like, because I think about this story with my grandfather. My grandfather on my dad's side was a miner, an iron miner. And my uncle, my dad's brother, was going through, after my grandfather had died, he was going through the attic with his mom, my grandmother, and saying, like he came across all this stuff. So they were packing stuff up and they were moving to a different home and all of this. And so, and he found this thing in in like the family Bible, right? So they would keep these things, pictures and whatever. He said, "Oh, I found this." He found this. What do I call it? Like pay stub. Just the pay stub of his check for that. And he said, "Mom, why? What's this doing in here?" He's like, it's single by itself. Why would it not be with all the other ones that he had if you kept them over those years? And she said, "Oh no, I remember that one. We saved it because of the event. There was like a bad flu, right? And so, and the miners were like being wiped out by this flu. And so it was during the war, and the mine had to keep going, right? It was like the biggest iron mine in the country. And so, so the mine set it up so that any worker, of course, times were different, right? There wasn't a lot of like labor laws and things like that, right? So he's like, any worker that didn't have the flu that wanted to come into work could work anytime they wanted, as long as they wanted. And so, my grandfather didn't catch it. So it's like, he would go in every day, and she's like, I remember that. So and it was like, he did like 100 hours that week. Heavy labor. This is literally breaking rocks. When I think about stuff, when people say like, well, it's not breaking rocks. It's like, this guy broke rocks for a living, right? Underground. No light, no anything, it's like artificial, light, no knowing if it's day or night outside, and working till he was literally exhausted.
Well, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world too. I mean,
exactly. Right. And like just working with a skeleton crew in there, leaving when he was so exhausted, he couldn't keep his eyes open, worked 100 hours that week. So 40 hours and 60 hours overtime, breaking friggin' rocks. And she goes, I remember that because, it's like we bought all the kids new boots and new jackets for winter because it's really cold up here. And, and we filled the pantry with groceries and we paid off all our bills. And I still had a few dollars to put, there was still money left over, meaning a few dollars, in the mason jar. I'm not kidding. They had a mason jar instead of a bank in the cupboard, right? Where they kept their savings. And my uncle told me, he goes, it always gets me, $32 the guy made for that week. And I'm thinking to myself, anytime somebody says, oh, you work so hard, I'm like, no, not in comparison, not compared to the people that I came from. It's like, and it's like, that's the thing. It's like, but the work ethic that they instilled in me, I produce it in the way that I can, but it's like, but even when I think about it, it's like, no, not working the way that, the way that he worked to provide for his family and to take the opportunities. How many people do we know that, like even within the law, right? If they're offered more hours, they go, fuck it, nah. Even if they have need of the extra hours, it's like, they won't do it. And it's like, they have their reasons, but in my head, it's like, I can't understand it. I can't put myself in that place. I've never been that person. It's like they may have their reasons and I'm okay with that, but it's like, but then don't bitch about, needing something extra and not being able to, somebody's not giving it to you. It's like you're given the opportunity, but it carries a shovel and it looks like work. So you're not going to do it. Right. It's like, that's that whole idea. So
it's interesting too. I mean, he was probably a lot happier in that than most people are not knowing what they have.
Can you imagine? It'd be like if somebody said, hey, we're going to give you the opportunity in a week's time to pay off all of your debt, all of it, to stock your household with food, to allow you to provide some extras that, your children need and whatever, we're going to give you the opportunity to do that, but you're going to have to bust your ass to do it. How many people would actually do that? It's like, that's the thing. Back then, or even when I was a kid, oh my God. I mean, people would all, if there was a fault, it would be that they'd overestimate how much they could actually do before collapsing. That would be the over idea, but it wouldn't be that they wouldn't do it.
Right.
It wouldn't be a choice. They'd be like, Jesus, that'd be awesome.
Do you think what you're saying here about sort of revealing and what's endemic to our culture now is really because we've crossed so far past the subsistence line and like our conversation before, that most of the world is still there. Most of the world is still in that steel mine and in that cocoa field and, whatever. And they're still doing all that. And we're sitting around not really knowing what to do. We're sitting in the Roman Empire before the fall and we're like, oh, like these are my first world problems. And
Yep.
And it is interesting because it's like we have so much opportunity. Like you said, I mean, we've been given the keys to the kingdom, not just because, we are the God here at this point, but because in the social and cultural context that we're in, we have so much opportunity,
well, that's it.
So much.
And we're, and that opportunity has come from the people that have come before us, right? And have built this place on innovation and hard work and a wicked work ethic, a melting pot at its very core, right? But all with that idea that they could make something of themselves and, make something and contribute also. It wasn't just make something for yourself, but it was also contribute, not just make it better for your kids or whatever, but actually build a society that would be good for everyone and better for everyone at some level. And, and I feel like, we're coming to that frontier in spirituality too, where it was like before it was, the spirituality was obviously, more limited, let's say, only a few choices. And now there's more of it, but we're expecting it all to be handed to us, like oh, I
Right.
just want to go to church on Sunday, or I just want to go to temple on Saturday, and just, let it all flow to me in a way that's going to be fine when I
How
get
much
out.
more too now? I mean, it's interesting to think, you're referring 2 generations back, right? And
Hmm.
I look at my dad, right? My dad grew up on a farm, worked on a farm his whole life. I
Yep.
mean, the work ethic, he's, 85 years old and he's out splitting wood today, right? I mean, he's just,
Right.
he's just a ball of muscles and like that,
Right.
but now it'd be interesting to think, where is this going? Because I mean, the children's children, they say, oh, my dad, man, he could watch so many YouTube videos in a day. It's like, it was so impressive. I mean, he could watch 500 YouTube videos in a day and ignore my mom's anorexia like nobody's business,
Yeah.
And it's like, is that where we're going? Is that what we're
Yeah. He
inheriting?
had the best excuses for not going to work. That
That
was
guy could
awesome.
tweet, man. He could tweet better than the president. Like he's a man. He was a tweeting machine. I mean, his fingers were curled over from tweeting so much. Think about that. Your grandfather worked hard on his social media to sell his money making program, right? I mean, Anyway.
Well, that's it. It's like it's so hard to know, right? It's like but I feel that that's where we've gotten, and it's like
those are such interesting experiences too, to just jump in and work, like even physical work. We've discounted it so much. And now, everything's going back to the trade schools now.
right.
Locally here, the local Voc school is like Harvard to get into. Kids are like, oh, I've got
Oh,
my
yeah.
interview. I've got my interview for Blackstone Valley. We're like, when Dustin and I were in school, we're like, what, the Voc school? What are you talking about? But it's like, no. And to their credit, I mean, it's an amazing institution. They teach
Absolutely.
people real things. It's not just let's go be an English major and get drunk for 4 years in college, right? It produces a person that wants to go and have a trade and do something valuable and add value to the world. You don't
Right.
need another communications major.
And if you have a couple extra brain cells to rub together, you get other people to, you organize a company, and instead of just installing, HVAC by yourself, you have 100 people working for you installing HVAC, and now you
Right.
have, the lifestyle that other people dream about, right? But
Right.
it's like, not from selling programs online, but basically from, doing hard work and things that people need. You find the value and, what people want, right? And it's like, I'm going to be the last person that, fixes my own HVAC system, right? It's like, I'm definitely one of those people that's taking advantage of these guys coming out and saying like, dude, I got plenty of work for you. Come, I'm happy to pay you to do this stuff. I value your services. So, I mean, it's like, where are we? What are we doing here? It's like the same thing, and I think that, these spiritual practices, and we want to bring it back to what we were talking about. It's like, how much do you want to be engaged in it? It's like, and what are you trying to get out of it? I think, again, what do you want from your spiritual practice? Do you want something as, let's say everything being equal, do you want some kind of visitation? If that's what you're looking for, well, there's a certain number of routes that will take you to that. Right. And so, and it's a shitload of work to do it. Right. It's because there's all these other things that you have to do before you can start, maneuvering along that path. And, but if it's just like you want to feel good about yourself for whatever reason, and, you're buying into this idea that, like suffering is okay, and you do that while you're here, and then when you die, you get everything. It's like,
all right, let's keep Catholic school out of this, please.
I'm a graduate. I've got the scars to prove it.
Well, I think that like really brings up the core of it for me in a lot of ways is like, with this program, I think that if we had an ideal model, like it would be more like those vocational schools that you're talking about, Niels, where it's like we want to build something that is like, offers something of real substance and a real value that's focused on like doing something, doing practices where like you do them, you put in some work and you get a lot out of it. and that it helps to provide for you and on those around you in some capacity. And with these things, it's like, for me, I know it's like this in so many ways is one of the most, it's extremely intangible, right? And yet I do liken it in my mind a lot more to work that is more closely related to craft and work with physical objects, whether it's like a carpenter making a table or like a plumber fixing the pipes. It's like, well, we're the table, we're the pipes. Our life is that, and that's what we're using these things for. So, right. But it's hard to, I think it's hard to like communicate that or to relate that and to show that, because it's not like necessarily at the end of doing these practices, you have, like a table to show somebody and you're like, this is like my master table, the best.
No, but I think you do. I think you do in the end. I would disagree with that, because it's like, of the other three territories, like if we stick with the four sort of umbrella territories, I haven't found anything outside of this, but let's say, your success or financial security, any of that stuff, one, your relationships, another one, your health, and then your spirituality, so those four territories, it's like out of all of those, right? Out of all of those, it's like, of all of those first three, we can almost guarantee that there's going to be some trials that those things are going to fall apart, right? It's like, whether it's health doesn't have to be something awful. It could be you break your leg, right? And so, you've got to repair that or whatever, or you have a bad illness and you're trying to bring it back, right? Or something, it's like success. You could lose everything and have to start over again, right? It's like, or, your investment fails, right? COVID, boom, and so, now, you're okay. You're still working. You're good. You've done other things, but that investment part is gone. So, it's like, and the same thing with relationships, people, whether it's friends or intimate relationships, they dissolve or something stressful happens within them, right? So all of those are sort of like, they can be stressed out, right? There are points where they get to a critical component where you're really, working within that structure isn't enough to, bring you through that in a good way to a better place, right? And I feel like, your spirituality, if it's a practical spirituality, it's enough to, sort of mitigate any of those things and get you through that. At least from my point of view, my personal experience, I've had major upsets with all three of those other things, okay? The health, relationships, finance, or security, any of that stuff. I've had major downfalls with all of those things. And it was only my spirituality, my practical spirituality, that was the thing that consistently, when practiced in the right way and directed toward those things, was the thing that actually, brought that back and brought it back in a better way than it was before. And so I feel like, that's the real point. And that's the thing, right? How balanced is your life in the way that you want it? What do you want? Why do you want it? What do you want? What's your picture of, the being that you want to be in at any given time? And does your spirituality, bring that to completion or move you in that direction so that you can occupy that? And I feel like that's really the sort of where the rubber meets the road with spirituality, at least from my perspective.
Ryan, couldn't you also say, I mean, even those four things that you listed are they're an artifice, they're a contrivance, right? That we use as a tool to understand these energies and forces around us. But I mean, there really is no spirituality without the physical, right? I mean, the physical is, there is no tree of life without Malkut. I mean, it is the basis. It's a reflection of us. It's our there's nothing in the physical that we encounter that doesn't have a deep meaning, whether we're aware of it or not, right?
Right. At least by our standards, it's like unless you're a true atheist, which I feel like is almost an oxymoron, right? That it's like you know,
you're God pretending that there's no God. Good for you.
yeah, you know, it's like nothing to see here, move along, right? So, so yeah, so there's, you know, it's kind of a weird thing, right? It's like, so if we go on that presupposition that, you know, that there's nothing that universe, that energy isn't in, or there's nothing that it's not, there's nothing that's here that's manifest that isn't made out of that energetic structure of one form or another, then, you know, you can't divorce yourself from it. So the only thing that you can do is to try to understand it and use it in a way that's going to promote what you want.
And I think,
right?
What Dustin said too, you just said, you know, you can't divorce yourself from it. I think what it is that we tend to try to divorce ourselves from it, right? We compartmentalize spirituality as separate. And so then we could conceive of this, you know, okay, I'm doing these spiritual practices because I want a result. And we sort of say, oh, you know, and Dustin and I used to joke about this too, you know, it's like, it's like you're trying to meditate and like the dog's barking, you're like, shut the fuck up, dog. I'm trying to meditate over here. You're disturbing my mind, you know, and you're like, gosh, if I could just stop that dog from barking, I would be enlightened right now, you know, and it's like, that dog is you, you know, it is you. And then it's like, right. So I totally get what Dustin's saying as far as like, you know, it can be difficult to feel like you're making progress sometimes too, especially, but like,
sure.
It's, don't lose sight of what you're losing sight of. Good luck with that.
Yeah, right. It's like, but that's the idea, right? Is that we and that's why it's so important to bring it back full circle. It's so important to have a goal, right? Because you're constantly course correcting. But if you don't have that goal in sight, you know, if you don't have that North Star, you know, there are plenty of ships in the ocean, right? That like, at least back in the day, right? When it was like, if it was an overcast, they had to wait for a clearing, right? They had no compass. They had to use a sextant, right? To, you know, go off the North Star to know whether they were going this direction or that direction. So they just had to wait. And so, you know, it's like, well, why? Why couldn't they just keep sailing? Well, they'd be sailing in circles, or they'd be going farther off course if they didn't know where they were going. So, you know, you constantly have to bring it back to that goal. And there's nothing wrong with having a goal, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. It doesn't mean that it's carved in stone. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't change your mind. I think that's another one of those things that people get nervous about, right? Like, oh, if I produce this goal, then, you know, what if I change my mind later? Well, then you change your mind. But it, you know, it's different between changing your mind and just, you know, willy-nilly changing it every time something gets tough, and then you're not going anywhere, right? You're just spinning in a circle, chasing your tail. So it's like, you know, if you're okay with that, well, you know, there are plenty of people that do it. So obviously a lot of people are okay with that, you know, deluding themselves into thinking that they're moving toward the direction that they want to go.
To sort of goad people into acting, it's something I've used for myself in doing the exercise of, you know, what do I want and why do I want it? It's that it's not an optional exercise. And what I mean by that is whether or not you sit down to do it or not, it still is happening. And what that means is if you sit down and do it, you direct your mind in a way where you go through this exercise, you list out what you want, why you want it, and you come up, you're choosing a star in that sky, right? And then you're going for it, right? If you don't do the exercise, it's not even so much like you don't have a goal, it's just that you have 1,000 of them. And that you're letting it go in a million different directions, right? And so, because I think if you don't represent it in that way, people are like, oh, I'll get around to that. And they're not getting the gravity and the import of not doing it. They're not understanding that you are always directing your awareness and energies towards something. It just might be simple. It could be two things. It doesn't even have to be 1,000. It could be two things in opposite directions, right? And all of that amorphous uncertainty and anxiety and pain, and you're going, oh, I just wish I could feel better. I just want to, just if only, and all these if onlys and wishes and buts and everything that feels like discord and chaos and disunity. It's like that is the result of the fact that you have not decided on a course. That is the manifestation of being rudderless, right? And so really push people into that exercise. Because for me, it took me a long time to approach that exercise at all.
Yeah,
And
sure.
like to, light a fire, like Jordan Peterson always talks about that. Right? You can motivate someone towards something or away from something. And if you can do both, more, the better. So it's like, here's the
Right.
promised land and here's the devil's pitchfork at your ass. Like, let's get moving here.
Right. Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that. Again, it's like using practical analogies. I mean, that's why I use them so much. It's not just, because it was one of the best pieces of advice, one of my teachers told me was that, like, anything that is theoretically confusing to you, try to put it in a physical, in physical parameters, so it's like use an analogy of something physical, because then it'll make your mind clear about what you understand, what you don't understand. Right. So it's like with stuff like that, it's like, from my experience and being in a very rural area, I mean, we get notices all the time of people who are lost in the woods or whatever. They've gone off the path or whatever it is. Right. So, and, many, many times, I mean, you talk to these, people who are rescue people, it's like they'll find these people, like they've just made these giant circles, right? Because they don't have any bushcraft at all, right? If they're off the trail, they're off the trail, right? They don't know the basics of using, from a compass to whatever, or maybe they don't even have that stuff with them. They just assume that, their phone's going to work, or,
Right.
Plenty of places around here still that the phones don't work. You don't get a signal. And so, not having any idea, but then putting yourself in that really treacherous environment, as far as getting lost goes, you're really putting your life on the line, right? It's like, and just knowing the basics of, like, pick a tree and walk to it. Pick another tree, walk to it in a straight line. It's like you keep doing that, you're going to eventually hit something, right? It's like,
Right.
But when you just sort of like maneuver around, it's very easy, believe me, and it's very, very easy. People don't think about it, but if you just drop somebody, if they don't have those basic understandings, you drop somebody in the middle of the woods, I guarantee you, they're going to just be walking in circles forever, until somebody comes and collects them. Right. So it's very hard.
That's an interesting analogy, like you said, against the spiritual practices, right? I mean, you go into the unknown you can get bruised up. You don't, you need to know what you're doing. Right.
You'll get bruised even if you don't know what you're doing, or even if you do know what
Right.
you're doing. Right. But it's like, but it'll be bruises, and that was another one this same guy would say, it's like, I expect you to get bruised, psychic bruises. I expect you to get bumps and bruises. Right. Nobody just straightens their tie and walks away, right, unscathed. That's a movie idea, right? That's not reality. But you don't want to get a knockdown punch. Bumps and bruises, fine. Scratches, even cut, fine. But you don't want to get a knockdown or a killing blow. That's the idea of training well, is that you have a better chance than not of not having that happen to you. Right. But it's like, don't expect to just come out of it unscathed. You will change. Otherwise, look, if you don't change at all, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be exactly where you are. Where you are right now is exactly from what you've done to this point. It's that clear. In order to achieve something different, you have to change yourself. It's the only thing that you have any kind of control over is just yourself. You can't change other people. You can't change the rules of the government. You can't change the type of medium that we use for money or whatever. It's like, you can only change yourself. If something's valuable, a society considers it valuable, then you change yourself to be able to produce that value, or introduce them into something that you think is valuable that, they may not know all of a sudden, already. And so that you can produce that for them and make yourself okay. But it's like, I feel like, that it always comes back to those things. It's like you need to be able to engage it in a way that produces a certain effect for you. And so that you can, but it's going to involve changing yourself, making some parts stronger, making other parts, eradicating other parts as much as possible in order to achieve, the goal that you're trying to achieve, whatever that is for each person.
Right.
I don't put any value on that.
You have to sacrifice everything you don't want to be that which you want to be. I mean,
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. It's like, when I start thinking about, and I'm not talking about, I'm just using the general ideas, right? It's like, look, we know, again, we don't have to guess about this stuff anymore, right? We have data on these things, right? It's like, and just because people are trying to achieve some kind of spirituality doesn't mean that they're apart from this data. They're part of this data set, right? It's like, look, we know that the average human, in the United States watches 5 hours of TV a day. Well, that's a pretty sad thing, because I know I'm not. And I'm sure you guys probably aren't either.
6-7 over here.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So you've got two of mine, or one from Nelson and one from me.
I got to pick up the slack from you later.
I know we're slackers when it comes to that. So, it's like, but that means there are other people that are literally turn it on from the morning to night, right? It's like they're doing 10, 12 hours a day. And
they're sitting in front of that flat electronic light machine that makes shapes that their reticular activation system can recognize, and it's good. I mean, it works out.
It's the big brain eraser.
Is it Newton Minnow? Television is a vast wasteland.
Yeah, that's right. But that's it. I mean, and there's nothing better to just sort of give your mind a break, when it comes to that, or, like, oh, I just want to watch something that's entertaining that I can just let my mind go and I don't have to think about it. I can literally be entertained,
right?
And that's fine.
It's like super neutral. It's like we have found so many neutrals. That's what our society does. It's just like, look at this neutral that I found. And, it's like, yeah.
And so it's difficult, it's like, so, but that becomes the norm. And then it's like, everybody's trying to one up themselves in neutral. Right. So it's like, but where does that get? And then wondering why they're not moving forward.
Right.
So, cool. you can push the pedal to the metal in neutral all you want and the engine revs, but you're still not going anywhere.
Right.
So
I know
for those of us that remember standard cars.
Loser.
So I know Niels has limited time this afternoon, so I want to wrap it up.
Next time we'll do like 6 hours, but this is good.
Awesome.
But I think one thing would be great. I just want to ask Niels one other question. Since a lot of this, we talked a lot about value, and to that point, I'd just be curious, because like one of the things that I was saying earlier about the program that we're doing is. For me, it's a challenge to always like articulate the tangibility of that value, because I'm so close to it. Like, even as an artist, in creating each piece of artwork that I make, it's like almost like my assessment of its value is so important for, my confidence in, or even my ability to like, I'll let somebody give me money for it, is like my stamp of approval that I've put on it. It's like, is it good enough? Is it perfect enough? Is it valuable enough? Is it beautiful enough? Is it, so that's constantly going on inside me as the creator of everything that like I produce. And so, try to hold myself to a very high standard. So it's just hard to sometimes see the beauty or the value in the things that you create, that aren't always like perfect or finished. And I feel like this program that I'm making with Brian is like something that's like, we're always working on it, like it's always getting better. And it's like, I always see room for improvement and ways that it can be better. So I guess what I was just curious, maybe you could share like from your perspective, like, because you've been one of the members of this thing from the beginning for the past like 3 years, like I'm just curious, like what is your experience of that value? What's the value that you get out of being a member of our program?
I think, there's obviously it's my own experience, right? You're asking for mine, and it is very personal. And I think it's going to, just to speak generally, I think it will vary from person to person. And I think that's the beauty of what you're doing, is that you're presenting very real spiritual principles, simplifying them and laying them out for people to understand, being available to ask questions and to explore those principles through their own experience, through their own unique, fingerprint that they are, because those principles are going to apply to them, but they're going to apply in different ways. And the reason I just set it up like that is that my answer to you, it might be a little different, but you'll understand it from some of the things that I spoke about on this talk. And that's, for me, when I look at the program, and it's something that you guys have espoused, and that's that the program is not for just anybody, right? You want, like Brian says, he wants those people that are, get the keys to the kingdom and want to make the most of it. And, it's sort of a, it's a higher level demand on people to put the work in, right? Now, it is for everyone in one sense, but you're only going to get something out of it if you put the work in. But if you're someone like me that comes to it and you find yourself you're not doing the work, I'm not living up to that level of work that Brian lives his daily life in, that I know you, Dustin, you put in on a daily basis, right? I didn't have that come naturally to me, and part of that's just the way, I have a very different personality. I mean, I have certain things that are working against me in that front, but at the same time, to achieve something, to focus. So, what does that mean to me? And what it meant to me from being in the program and being around you guys and learning all these principles, it sort of coaxed that out of me. It sort of sussed that out of me to say, okay, what do I need to do to get this work done? What is it that I need to do? And really, it was right at the very beginning, and we've talked about it on this call, and it's, what do you want and why do you want it? And if there's nothing else that I get from this program, it's the value of that. I mean, that really is it. And if you look at it's interesting. You look at that as kind of the core, and then you build these, the body relaxation and all. You build these core principles around it, but the core of it is, what do you want and why do you want it? Day one, you've got to answer that question. And I struggled forever answering that question, but sort of being around the program and listening to you guys talk and listening to the various videos and all of the talks, and just hearing that over and over again, and constantly getting hit with it in the head. What do you want? Why do you want it? And realizing that I'm not answering that question accurately enough, I realized finally what Brian means when he says, go do the simple practices. It's like, I've got to do that. I've got to do that. I've got to answer those questions. And that for me was the biggest thing, was realizing that power in those simple practices. Because it's easy, it's so funny. I mean, everything is like right there. It's writ large. It's right there. But it's so easy to overlook the simple practices. I can literally hear Brian tell me, "Hey, I'm this established practitioner. Seems like a accomplished guy. He comes across as having lived what he espouses, and I have a certain level of trust with him because I know you, and I know Brian on a certain level, and I can still hear him say, these simple practices are the most important," and go, "Oh, okay. Oh, cool. All right. I'm going to go do this," and it's like, hear him again. "Oh, okay. The simple are the most important. Yeah. I don't know. What can I do that's cooler? Where can I go that's going to be more fun than this?" It's like, look, it's really fucking hard. I don't know. Like, when I sit down to do that, all this stuff comes up that's like kind of me, and I'd rather just be kind of this other idea of who I am. And so to really sit down and do those, that for me. And I'm not done with that. I mean, that's still an ongoing process for me. But just starting that is, again, the best thing that I could possibly do for my spiritual growth, right? Because my experience, my world, everything that is around me, the people I surround myself with, the environment I'm in, the nature of that environment, that is all a reflection of who and what I am. And to realize that and engage with that on a daily basis, and again, learning those simple practices, from you guys, and then even some of the higher level stuff, maybe you just take tidbits from it, and it's about with the contact course now, it's again about being in my environment, being aware of my environment, being aware that it is a reflection of me, and kind of experiencing it in different ways rather than shutting myself in, because I'm a very mental person, intellectual, to be in my head, to get more into that experience and realize that here I am in this world and I'm doing it. And, where do I want to put my awareness, my energy, and my focus? And that's what do you want? Why do you want it? So does that answer your question, Dustin?
Yeah, it does.
And I think just in a nutshell too, I mean, the really good point that you hit on was, and much like Dustin was talking about with his artwork, is it this, is it that, is it good enough for him to actually have somebody want it or pay their own time and effort into acquiring that and sacrificing that in order to acquire something that he produced. And, and when I think about it again, from we're all creators, we're all artists in a way. I'm hoping that we're all artists in a way. It's just, some of us are still drawing stick figures, and, and if we're okay with that, we're okay with that. But, the thing that we're all creating is a life, right? It's like we're creating the life we want. I mean, that's where my idea of spirituality should be helping people create the life that they want. If you're falling short by your own, estimate, that you're falling short in any of those other areas,
right?
Then you use your spirituality to understand that, to see that mirrored in your environment and say like, oh, that's not them, that's me. That's an aspect of me that's being mirrored in the environment. So, right. What can I do to adjust myself to that? Am I am I correct? Am I wrong? Am I, let's evaluate that and see how I can enhance it or dissipate it, right? In order to produce the life that I want in any aspect.
That's an interesting thing. Brought up this thing I say to myself sometimes, and that's you're either creating or you're inheriting. Right. So you're either creating or you're inheriting something that you've already created, basically, right? You're living out a pattern or something, Right. And so it's that moment of sort of like, okay, if I don't want it to be like this, I've got to create something new. It's up to me. I am inheriting. I'm living my karma. I'm inheriting everything that I've created and creating. It's up to me to change that and create. So.
Right. And if you don't do it, somebody will do it for you.
And they're usually a dick.
We can all agree on that. Yeah, it's like that's one of the universe's tricky little backhanded compliments. It's like, oh, you're not going to do anything about that? Well, maybe here's a little motivation for you. You're just going to leave that open space. Well, that whole nature abhors a vacuum, right? So let's put something in that space that really occupies it to the nth degree.
Cool. All right, boys, I got to wrap up, but it was really good talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you, man. It's awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And like we discussed in the earlier part of the conversation, I guess we'll keep our program open to the public to join whenever they want for 90 days. We'll run our experiment and see what happens. So if you guys enjoyed it and you want to dive into some of the practices, we wholeheartedly invite you to do so. And if you have any questions about it, you can always email us at 2BSilent@2BSilent.com. And thanks again.